Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started, as a therapist and as a social worker. Let's start with the therapist part first, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I decided to become a therapist at a relatively young age. I think I was like 2 or 4 at the time. And for me, that is a pivotal piece because coming from the lower class blue collar background, coming from parents that are immigrants, uh, it took me from that age onward to be able to grow the skills, resources, and connections to become a therapist. And so for me, working from that young age constantly and finding as many opportunities as possible and being very blessed with people who believed in me, I was able to work my way towards becoming a therapist. And if you want me to go into my resume, I totally can do a deep dive with that. But again, having the that intersectionality, um, more often than not, the work that goes into this kind of career trajectory, it takes a lot of years and quite a big group of people that strongly believe in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My next question here is, what made you want to dive deeper into BIPOC communities and, how they're affected by, things like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that? Like what sorts of things do you focus on, particularly with those groups?
Hmm. Yeah. So one of the avenues that informed my decision to work with BIPOCs is my own lived experience. I think many of us, whether we remember it or not or are aware of it, we are informed by our lived experiences. And so one of the areas that growing up that I noticed that didn't have a great deal of representation was BIPOCs in professional positions. And if they were in professional positions, they were not in the leadership positions. And so I decided that, well, I want more people that sound like me, look like me, that understand the culture. And that means that I'm gonna I'm gonna have to be the one to go and do it. And so that's when I was very fortunate to be able to um, have opportunities to grow my skill set. And just because I'm a part of the community doesn't mean that I understand all the needs of the community. There is constant training and work that goes into being able to show up in a way that is helpful, that is supportive, and that is culturally humble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important. So, like, let me l- let me make sure that I'm asking the right questions here. What's the relationship? l- Hold on, let me see. What sorts of things do you focus on with BIPOC individuals? As a therapist. I know I forgot to ask this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for asking that question because um, there are always different needs within the various demographics. So thank you. Well, one of the pieces that I think I bring that others may not be able to fully provide in therapy is allowing a space that is, yes, non-judgmental, but also where my patients, clients, whatever word you decide to use, participants, um, where they're able to let their guard drop, to let that mask fall, and they are able to speak um, Spanish. They're able to speak whatever heart language that they grew up with. And me being able to listen and respond and understand nuances that they don't have to explain to me. And while they may have a different ethnicity than myself, they are able to share a lot of discrimination and racism that shows up on a daily basis, and that other providers may not understand and may not validate the hardship that they have to regularly undergo and the additional labor that is unseen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My next question here is, like, I don't know if you've seen if you've seen any research on this, but like, what's the relationship between BIPOC individuals and, depression, anxiety? What are some of the trends, statistics that you've seen, if any?
Hmm. I really appreciate that you frame it in that way, because all I can really speak to is are the clients that show up in the therapeutic space, and the research that's being done that informs the type of therapeutic approach that I take. And what I've noticed is that I'm so background. I am a trained clinical social worker, which means that my training really informs the approach that I take. And for me, there are interlocking systems that and that inform the mental health and holistic well-being of a person. And with BIPOCs, not only are you navigating systems that were not created to be supportive, that were created to act as barriers, you're also trying to do so in an environment that is constantly invalidating, and an environment where people don't recognize the unearned privileges and historical benefits that have been handed to them. And when you, as a BIPOC individual, try to have these types of conversations, people in those positions of power don't recognize the sheer amount of power that they hold. And so because of this, there are a lot of additional challenges that BIPOC people face that isn't discussed. So, for instance, the type of neighborhoods that you're allowed and welcomed into, whether or not your parent is able to work one job and receive benefits, whether or not your parents are able to have the connections to be able to receive the promotions within a work setting. There are so many variables that inform your own life trajectory and the opportunities that you're presented with. And because all these interlocking systems aren't made to support you as a BIPOC in leading a successful life, you're having as an individual to constantly face so many more hardships that your peers are experiencing. And because your peers don't experience those hardships, they don't understand where you're coming from. They don't understand half of what you're saying, because to them the world is a wonderful, beautiful place, and they have all these opportunities, and they have these social capital, that they know how to talk, they know the right places to talk about, they have similar vacations and experiences, and so when they interview, they are a reflection of what people are used to seeing, and they're much more likely to receive admission into these spaces, professional spaces that BIPOC aren't given access to and that are gatekept away from. Um, and so for me, there's so much systemic discrimination taking place that causes greater mental health, environmental harm, physical harm to BIPOCs that other populations aren't exposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. So my next question here is, what are some strategies and tools that you sort of use as a therapist to help individuals, BIPOC individuals with, mental health issues or any sort of disorders that they might have. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but did you get my point?
Yeah, I understand. What therapeutic approaches do my clients find most helpful?
Yeah,
And
what strategies you use to sort of help them out in those circumstances? Yeah.
mhm. And so there's so many different therapeutic approaches out there. Um, the ones that I draw upon regularly: cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed care, narrative therapy, racial healing, somatic exercises, ancestral practices that my clients have that are a part of their culture, but that aren't recognized within the profession. And if they are recognized, then that they are credited to ancestral practices. Um, those are just a few. I mean, I could send you a full list. As a therapist, um, we're expected to be trained in a lot of different areas and to be able to pull from that toolbox to support our specific clients. But on the whole, generally speaking, those are the therapeutic approaches that I use most often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lastly, oftentimes people feel comfortable disclosing, mental health issues, to a friend or to a close relatives. Oftentimes people not so much. Like why is that? Like what are some of what are some of the ways in which people don't disclose their mental health issues very easily? Because um because us as people, we're used to like peeling back the onion and sort of opening ourselves up about what's going on in the world. But like, why is that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a brilliant question. I I think that one of the reasons why we have a hard time opening up and accessing mental health support is that we're taught that that's not for us. We're taught that only a specific type of person can access that kind of support. We're taught that just to bear it and use grit to overcome anything and everything. That work, that substances are our therapy. And as a person from a collective culture, the expectation is that if you say that, hey, I need mental health support, then you're saying there's something wrong with me. And because we're so interconnected, how am I reflecting the best for the communities that I'm a part of? I understand that there are greater layers to this that cause barriers. I mean, for instance, I could think about like economically, whether or not you have access to the financial means to receive mental health support. More often than not, you may need it and want it, but that doesn't mean that you'll have a provider that understands the kind of support that you're looking for and that can actually provide it in a way that is healing rather than harmful. And I'm not saying that providers have the intention of being harmful. That I do not believe that. I do recognize that not all providers have the training and lived experience to provide the type of care that BIPOC communities are looking for. And I also recognize that even within that, just because you find a therapist doesn't mean that they're going to be a good fit, that you're going to mesh with them. And so there's a long process in being able to find someone that you can disclose your concerns to. And because of that, there's there's just so much more work that goes into it that that person may not have the time to perform. And so I think, again, there's multi-layers as to why a person isn't able to access the mental health support that's needed. Stigma that I had mentioned previously, false stereotypes, false beliefs of what is therapy, what's involved in it, um, the collective nature of specific cultures and how they respond to people going outside and sharing family struggles or personal mental health struggles. Um, Looking at the various forms of religious beliefs and how do they inform whether or not someone is deserving or undeserving of mental health struggles. Um, so I think for that question, there are just so many different reasons for why someone may have a hard time reaching out for the support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my next question here, my last question here is, I wanted to segue into this next question of like, what can we do to like make sure that BIPOC individuals, who are struggling with mental health, find that safe space where they can not only feel accepted, but like they're able to sort of be comfortable in sharing those experiences with others, like how can we do that? Um,
How can we support BIPOCs with accepting and loving themselves and loving others and providing that additional layer of support? I think that is the million-dollar question. I think that there are so many different approaches that need to work in cohesion in order for us to find avenues of increasing access and mental health support for BIPOCs. I think looking at, for example, looking at the ways in which clinicians are trained and the various therapeutic styles that are upheld and lifted, um, restructuring what we consider to be the training model for clinicians, rethinking and deconstructing the ways in which we provide and believe certain styles are professional and others aren't. For example, within some therapeutic circles, it's believed that um, doing anti-racism work as a clinician, that's not true therapy, that is not what our profession is supposed to do. However, as a member of the BIPOC community, I believe that is one of the many wonderful ways in which you can truly help people with healing and moving forward and having healthier communities, healthier lives, healthier families. Uh, and so there's that level, that approach that would need to work in conjunction with looking at the ways in which BIPOCs, who's hired, who's promoted, what kind of trainers do they bring into those spaces that can add a diversity of thought and perspective. Looking also working in conjunction with the community and saying, hey, what do you need? How can we better support you? What are some ways that we can partner together so that we can start changing this false narrative that um, BIPOCs are undeserving of mental health support? Looking at also working in conjunction with resources. There aren't a lot of mental health resources specific towards supporting BIPOCs. And so, how can we increase the amount of funds available for BIPOCs to access quality care? How can we, again, look at the system in which, if you're experiencing homelessness, that's a very traumatic experience that has a long-standing effect on the mental health and well-being, physical well-being, total well-being for a person. And so, from a systems level, how are we providing support to that person so that they can do the work of being able to process the trauma that's happened to them? And so, for me, it's the systems being able to work in conjunction and to reduce the competitive nature of those systems for resources, and instead find ways in which to collaborate and share resources to better support BIPOCs. And ensuring throughout it that you are being guided by the community, because you can have a lot of ideas of what you think is best, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work, because if the
Mhm.
community has identified that that isn't the core issue, well, then you just wasted a lot of money.
Those are some important points there.